Hello and welcome to Just Films and That. We're going to discuss a film that we feel may be underrated, underappreciated, or we just wanted to talk about it. I'm Josh and I'm here as ever with Alice. Alice, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Josh, and yourself?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very excited to say that we're joined by another brilliant guest. We're joined by Drew Selby from the band Rosellas. Drew, how are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. So we always start with a completely random question. So I'm going to go to Alice first, and then we'll come to you, Drew. Alice, what's the best era for music?
That is a tricky one, but
it's a big one. It's a biggie.
That is a biggie. We might upset a lot of people here, but I would say because the Doors are my favourite band of all time, I've got to say the 60s.
Right.
And I
Nice.
think, and just stretching into the 70s as well, like I love Pink Floyd, love the Eagles, love Fleetwood Mac, that sort of thing. And I would say that sort of rock is probably like my favourite genre, but I do like, I pretty much love all the genres. So I would have to say the 60s for that reason.
60s.
What about you, Josh?
It's a tough one because
It is a tough one.
I have a terrible taste in music.
Yeah, your taste is pretty shit, actually. I feel like mine's dead good.
Like I've got the sort of taste that people go, oh, that's eclectic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what they mean is, this is bad.
Yeah. I suppose everyone's different.
I mean, I grew up like in the 90s, so like,
Spice Girls, Boyzone,
Spice Girls,
those as well, yeah.
Aqua, S Club 7, all the big ones. But I'd probably say, because it's difficult, isn't it? Because you could argue like, 200 years ago was the best time for music because of all the, the stuff that happened then. I'm going to say the 80s.
Okay, yeah.
Because I like a lot of, that sort of era of Prince music and
you do like Prince a lot,
Love
don't
Prince.
you, actually?
I do. So I'm going to go with the 80s. So, Drew, big one for you. You're a musician.
Oh, yeah.
What's the best era for music?
2020s, when Rosellas break onto the scene.
Yeah, fair enough.
I honestly, I've got to agree with Alice. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. It's back end of the 60s into the 70s for me. Pink Floyd are my top band of all time. Doors and people like that are up there, Zeppelin. So I'm going to agree with Alice.
You're outnumbered, Josh.
I should have known based on the posters behind you what you were going to say because you
yes, didn't even notice.
I just put them up for this interview today, by the way. It's not like they're there all the time.
I need them to think I'm cool.
So, we will move on to talking about this week's film, which Drew has picked, and it is Lords of Dogtown from 2005. So, spoiler warning if you've not seen it. Drew, you picked this one, so tell us a little bit about what it's about and why you picked it.
Yeah, man. So, I picked it because ever since I was a little nipper, I was always into skateboarding. Done a little bit of surfing on the side, that's in the movie as well, but I've always been big into skateboarding and I still skate a lot in my life today. And that film is basically set in California in the mid-70s, and it's about the Zephyr Surf team and how they were one of the first sort of teams to form in the early days of skating. Back then, it was nothing like what you see now. You know what I mean? It was all like figuring circles and like handstands and all that shit. But yeah, it's just a cool movie, man. It's got a good cast, great soundtrack, and it's just all about like smoking weed and skateboarding, which... for most people, it wouldn't be a bad film to watch.
Fair enough. So would you say, is it underrated or underseen? Should more people see it? Is it not rated very well? Or is it just, you just like it and you want to talk about it?
I think it's all three at once, to be honest, man. Because I looked it up, right? I've never actually looked at the reviews for it, but it's been absolutely pissed on like Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that. It's on like 50% I think it's a class film, man. My sister was the one that introduced it to me, and my mum had the DVD, so it's kind of like I've not come across it online. So I think it's underrated in that sense if people think it's shit, because it's just not. And I think it's massively underseen because only like my mates that skate have seen it. Everyone else I mentioned it to, they're like, what the earth are you on about, mate?
Yeah.
Lots of what?
Well, let's get into it then and see if we can figure out if you're right or not. So Alice, had you seen this one before?
So I hadn't seen it, and I hadn't seen it, and I hadn't heard of it until earlier this year because a couple of people have now recommended it to me because I started trying to learn to skateboard at the
yeah.
beginning of this
forgot
year.
about that.
Yes,
Yeah.
come on.
So when I tell people that, they're like, "Oh, have you seen Lords of Dogtown?" And I was like, "No." And it's like, "Oh, it's got Heath Ledger in it. I think you'd really enjoy it."
Man.
So I was like, okay. So when Josh told me that this is what you'd picked, I was like, awesome. I'm actually going to get to watch this film. I absolutely loved it. I'm not gonna like lie. I'm not gonna try and sort of come across as level-headed about this. I was just totally absorbed into that world completely. I loved every single second of it. I don't know why. I don't know if it just really spoke to me as a teenager, because skateboarding for me was always one of those things that I wish I could have done. Like, I used to rollerblade a lot. I could ice skate. My balance has always been fine, but I went on a skateboard for the first time when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I was just terrible. And that just put me off, and I was scared, and I was like, oh my God, I can't do it. And then as I was getting towards 30, I was like, I need to try it. I need to just see if I can, because I thought that I could. Because it's like, I know I can balance. I know if I just practice and if I'm confident enough, then I could do it. So I started learning. I can't do any tricks or anything, but I can go. Like, I can just go forward. So I was really excited to watch this. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I thought the whole aesthetic of it was just incredible. It felt so much older than from 2005. I feel like they did a really good job of sort of bringing you into the 70s, really, which is obviously when it's set. I thought some of the acting was great, because obviously you've got all these really young lads, and it starts off and you're like, oh, is this going to be like a bunch of sort of child actors who don't really know what they're doing? But I actually thought they really pulled it together really well. I love the story, and I love the characters within that story. It's like a really different take on this sort of coming of age story, and you get to kind of follow their turmoil. Like with any group of people who become incredibly successful or famous, they have these horrendous issues, and then they have this fallout. Kind of, reminded me of like Fleetwood Mac's story, of Oasis's story. Like, these people who come together, do something they love, get really successful off of it, and then it just kind of poisons them in a weird way. Loved all the skateboarding. I absolutely loved it. There were so many like praise the cameraman moments, because it felt like the camera was on the skateboard with them a lot of the time.
When they're in the pool and that.
Yeah, and that was a brilliant scene. Sorry, Josh, I'll wind it in a bit.
No,
Had you seen this? Had you seen this one?
No. So I hadn't seen it before. I had heard of it. So I similar to yourself, Drew, I was like into skateboarding a little bit, like when I was about sort of 15, 14. I could never do any tricks. I could pretty much just stand up and go down the road. But so one thing that this film, it's not that it doesn't capture it, but skateboarding is so hard. to be able to go up and down a ramp is unbelievably difficult, and the fact that it's only just got into the Olympics, I think it's quite sort of scandalous, really, when you think of some of the other things that whether you like them or not are in the Olympics. So no, I hadn't seen it before. I had heard of it, so I knew about it mainly because, as I might have said before, or certainly might have said in an upcoming episode, that I am a Heath Ledger fan, and I knew that he was a skateboarder, that he was really into skateboarding. So one of my favourite pictures, you might have seen it, is a picture of him. He's dressed up as the Joker, and he is jumping over Christian Bale dressed as Batman.
On his skateboard.
On a skateboard. So he used to skate.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so he always used to skateboard to set. I don't know if every film, but apparently he always used to skateboard to set to The Dark Knight. And yeah, there's a really famous picture of him jumping over Christian Bale.
You're gonna have to show me that, man.
I will share it. I'll share it when this goes out on social media. But no, I think there's lots to like in there. I think you've already alluded to it, Drew. I think there's a great cast. It's particularly good performances from Heath Ledger. I think he's actually, I was watching it with my partner, and I said, she said, is there anyone famous in this? And I said, yeah, Heath Ledger, he's there. And she went, is that Heath Ledger? Because he's got the fake teeth in, hasn't he? And he does wear sunglasses for most of the film, so I suppose you could be forgiven for not recognising him in it. Rebecca De Mornay as well, who plays Jay's mum. I think she's really good in it. I think Emile Hirsch is quite good in it as well. So we should say as well is that it's a true story, right? So the three main characters in it, the Zephyr Boys, Jay Adams, Tony Alva, and Stacey Peralta. So Stacey Peralta wrote it. He made a documentary about the story, and then they adapted that documentary into the film, which is what we're talking about now. Again, like you said, Alice, I really love the way it looks. A lot of it seems to be shot on a handheld camera.
Feels like it.
And if it's not, it feels like it, right? So it's got that really grimy sort of sweaty feel to it, doesn't it? Which you associate with the era. Sorry, everything's very grey, and the aesthetic feels really like real and appropriate to the era, and that's down to both the way it looks, the costumes, the way it's shot, and all that. Again, like you said, Drew, fantastic soundtrack. You got, amongst others, Jimi Hendrix, Rod Stewart, Alice Cooper, Black Sabbath, Fogerty, loads. There's loads in there. It reminded me a little bit. Have you seen Almost Famous or Dazed and Confused?
I've seen Dazed and Confused, but Almost Famous is on the list.
So Almost Famous. I mean, it's not similar in it's not about skateboarding, but but it's similar. It's a similar sort of idea of like almost like it's a similar feel to it and a similar sort of soundtrack because it's set in that era. It's really good. You should check it out. As well as a really good cast. There's a lot of good supporting people in there. A lot of good cameos as well from people who then went on to be massive stars. So you've got Sofia Vergara's in it, America Ferrera's in it, Jeremy Renner's in it, Joel McHale's in it.
Back up. Jeremy Renner's in it? Where's Jeremy Renner?
Jeremy Renner plays one of the guys who has made skateboard for one of them, possibly Jay. And he says it's shit and the wood's shit and the wheels are shit.
I didn't know it's Jeremy Renner.
So it's Jeremy Renner. He's in it, in that bit.
Who is Jeremy Renner? I don't know.
Have you liked the Avengers films?
No way.
It's Hawkeye. Yeah,
he plays Hawkeye.
Yeah, and he's in this.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch it.
Yeah,
keep an eye out for it.
So he's in it.
Keep your Hawkeye out.
Yeah, well, and speaking of Hawks, Tony Hawk's in it.
Yeah,
Tony Hawk plays.
Great scene.
So because it's just like it's a proper wink and a nod to that, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's harder than it looks. Yeah, I mean he's the greatest skateboarder of all time or whatever. He's like the most famous, but. Yeah, so I knew some of the people in it, but I knew some of the people in it because of the games, the Tony Hawk games.
Yeah.
So like I think a lot of them are in it as characters, like playable characters, stuff like that. So overall, I mean, I really liked it. So what specifically do you love about it, Drew? Is it just the overall thing? Is it a nostalgic thing? Does it take you back to a place where you loved skateboarding, or what?
I think for me, like the first thing that sort of captured me about it was the soundtrack, because I remember I've got very early memories of watching that film in my room with like my sister and whatnot. And it opens to Voodoo Child, man. You know what I mean? I was like a 9-year-old learning to play guitar, and you hear that and I was just like, wow, what the fuck is that? And that kind of captured me in. And then it's the acting, man, because I love Emile Hirsch as an actor. He's in another great film that's my sister's favourite film of all time called Into the Wild.
Oh, yeah.
And like Eddie Vedder did the soundtrack for that. All the films in our family, man, are based around soundtracks. But so I recognised him, and I like the character he plays, and I like how all of them, like all of the young boys and girls in the Zephyr team, are just like a big group of mates, and they're just getting pissed and skating down the road, being mischievous, like flicking hats off people, like knocking bins over it. It makes me want to be a kid back then. It makes me want to be 17 back then, instead of learning in Hamforth, where I grew up, where, knock a door run and you get crucified for it.
Yeah. No, you're right. And it does a really good job. I mean, something that we've not talked about enough, and you alluded to it, Alice, is just the way they shoot the skateboarding. Because we've talked about it before on other episodes, but shooting sport is notoriously difficult. So something that is as fast as skateboarding, there must be a lot of handheld stuff in there.
I think what they get right in that is when they have those big pool sessions, which is also just cool as fuck how that's true. They used to drain people's pools and go in there and skate them and all that. But they get like, when people are airing out at the top, the film camera will pause on a magazine shot and it will like transfer to the front cover of a magazine. And it's like a genuine replica of what it was. But then it's a dead creative way of doing it. Instead of just going like, wow, skateboarder there, vroom, 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 you'd lose interest in that, wouldn't you? I think they do it quite cleverly.
It really immerses you in the world, doesn't it? So it's like, So one of the things I found with it to start with was that it's quite overwhelming, and it just goes, look, here's all the characters straight away. and it's quite like, oh, forget, like, who is everybody?
When
and
they're
I think,
surfing.
and I think that's a purposeful choice. I think what it's done is it's presenting you with the world and going like, this is what it is. It's all quite fast. It's all quite chaotic. It reminds me a little bit of have you watched The Sopranos?
I haven't seen The Sopranos, no, but my cousins recommended that to me.
So one thing The Sopranos does, which was, I don't know if it was the first to do, but obviously it was very sort of progressive in terms of how TV is made, is that it just presents you with all the characters. It doesn't like go, this is who this is, this is who this is. It goes, this is who everybody is, this is who these people are going to be your friends for the next couple of hours. You'll get to know them, sort of thing.
Yeah. He said to me that The Sopranos is like one of the first ones that kind of turned everyone on to doing the series kind of thing. Is that right? Was it like one of the first majors?
So it's considered to be like the first, I think, like box office TV show. So it was on HBO, and since then you've had, like, if you think of every massive TV show, Game of Thrones, event TV, essentially movie quality TV. That's sort of what it is, and that's one of the things it does really well. Is there's loads of characters in Sopranos and all different families and all different people who know each other, and this person went to school with this person, but it never mollycoddles you and spoon feeds you. It just goes, no, they just know each other, and that's it. You've got to deal with it. So I guess it's not spoon feeding your audience. It's respecting you as an audience member to just be able to make it up as you go along. So I don't know, Alice, what else did you like about it?
I mean, going off what you said there, one of my notes is that there wasn't heaps of exposition. Like, they weren't just information dumping, and it was a lot of just show, don't tell, which, can go one way or another. And like you say, because there are so many characters, but they did a good job at just kind of giving you like bits and bobs of information so that you can piece it all together and you can kind of get to know all of them as individuals. But a lot of that for me is because it's so like a home movie. It felt so much like a home movie in the way it looked, the way it was shot, just kind of everything about it, the way that the characters were. Like, it was so shaky at times. And just, the way they filmed the skateboarding, and it was just, there was enough skateboarding in it for me as well. Like, I was worried because when you see some of the first scenes of the skateboarding, it's like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, I hope half the film is this. And then it was. And I was like, awesome. What else did I like about it? It's just so many things. I loved Skip as a character. I loved seeing Heath Ledger anyway. And for me, he was kind of like a cross between like Jim Morrison and Kurt Cobain, just kind of in the way he looked, in the way he held himself, just kind of like this kind of weird charisma, like this weird 70s charisma that was just kind of so alluring, but then also really questionable at the same time. And wasn't he's like smoking weed around these kids and stuff, and it's like, oh, you naughty man, but he's just like so fucking cool at the same time. Like, you just definitely feel like mums would also fall in love with him. I think all the young actors did such a good job. And I just believed it all. And I was just so in it. And I don't know what happened. This happens to me sometimes. Like, within the first few scenes, I was just in it. And then I was just in it all the way through. And I loved every single minute of it. It just totally grabbed me, the way it was designed, the way it was written. Also, to be fair, when things are a true story, Drew, Josh and I did In the Heart of the Sea not too long ago, and that's based on real events. And when something is based on real events, that does draw me in a lot more, because it's like there's actually something at stake. Like, these people lived, these situations actually happened. So when you feel their highs, you feel them with them. And then when you feel their crushing lows, you feel them as well. And like, because they were so young and they were so ambitious but so talented as well. Oh, I just bloody loved it.
I was going to say one more thing about the film. I wrote it down on here because I was looking up the cameos before I came on, because I was like, I remember seeing Tony Hawk in it. I remember seeing Johnny Knoxville on it.
Yeah.
Johnny,
I mean, who doesn't love Johnny Knoxville? Like? Yeah. And then they were saying in it that Jay Adams, Stacey Proton and Tony Alva actually make like their own guest appearances.
Yeah, they're all in it.
Like background, like someone's at a party, someone like the guy selling the board and that. And I just think it's meant that they were probably on set directing the other lads, sort of with their, charisma and sort of the different
playing
roles
themselves.
Play. Yeah, it's like because you can see in the film that they all start skating like slipways and little like concrete waves because they're used to surfing and stuff like that. They just skate down the road, and you can see very quickly how like Stacey and Tony after that competition become very commercial and they become like the poster boys and they're making the millions and all that. And I love how Jay Adams just stays true to his roots. He ends up becoming a bit of a skinhead, doesn't he? And he still hangs around with Sid, gets into a bit of trouble and whatnot. But he's like the raw kind of heart of skateboarding. You know what I mean? He's the one that kind of carried on all the street stuff, and all the other guys were off doing the competitions, and they're all great, but it's good to explore that in a film, isn't it?
That was such a dramatic transformation as well, because when he shaves his head, he looks like a completely different fella. Like he looks so different, and he looks so extreme, like someone that you probably would cross the road from if you saw them walking towards you at night. Like the actor's got such a menacing, like intense stare.
Yeah, because he sits there with his jaw kind of like propped out a bit, doesn't he? Just trying to iron you off a bit.
and like you said, Drew, it even says at the end that although he's had, I mean, unfortunately, he's now passed away, the real Jay Adams, but he at the time was still alive, and they say at the end of the film he is sort of acknowledged as being responsible for the spark that then went on to become skateboarding. So whilst the others were very commercially successful, he seems to be all about the ideology of it and that side of things. And I think that's quite clear. I mean, you know, look, he had his issues, right, which we don't need to go into on this, but in terms of the film, like you say, you're absolutely right. I think out of all the 3 or 4 main young characters, that one, it has the most difficult job, really.
Yeah, he's definitely my favourite. It resonates with skateboarding today, man. Like the funnest thing to do when you're out with your mates skateboarding. I like to skate parks and proper designated areas and all that, like most skaters do. But the funnest thing is looking at things that aren't meant to be skated and thinking, how the fuck can we skate that? How can we be a menace? How can we piss that security guard off so he'll fuck off and leave us here? You know what I mean? It's that childishness inside you, and like you just want to explore things. And you fall off a billion times like Jay Adams does in the film, but it's the fact that they're focusing in on that whole side of skating where it doesn't have to be this big commercial successful sport. There is a proper route in it where people can do like creative things. Like jumping over fence posts and staircases, you know what I mean?
So in terms of sports films then, would you say this is one of the better ones at capturing the essence of the sport itself?
Oh, definitely, man. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it got me into skating when I was a kid, and I'm sure that's what the director and the actors wanted. You know what I mean? Other kids to watch it and think, fucking hell, that's well cool. I want to try that.
So we'll move on to talking about things that we perhaps might change or that we didn't like. I can't see this being a particularly lengthy section. Alice, what about you? Was there anything you changed, anything you didn't like?
I really tried to find something so that we could have a balanced discussion, but I couldn't see anything. I just loved it from start to finish. I'm sure if either of you come up with something, you know, I'll consider it, and hopefully, you know, we can get into that. But nah, there wasn't. I slept on it, and I was like, oh, maybe think about it in the morning, see if you can come up with anything. But nah, there was nothing for me.
Drew, I'm guessing you're the same.
I think I would have liked to have seen a bit more of the surfing in it. I really, really like that opening scene.
That's a good point.
And I like how all the older boys in the water were saying to the young lads, like, nah, you're not coming out on the waves until you've cleaned our cars and kicked them hippies off down the road. You know what I mean? It shows the kind of like the hierarchy that is at things like skate parks and surfing areas. So I would have liked to see a little bit more of that. And I think it's also worth a quick mention on the fact that it's nice how it comes full circle, isn't it, at the end? I forgot to say it before. So they have a falling out, don't they? And Tony Alva becomes a bit of a dick, and him and Stacey fall out. But then they all skate that pool at the end because the mate's got cancer and they have him in the pool. Yeah. And I think if it didn't have that at the end, that is something I would want to change. And I'd want to see them come back together as a group of mates. But it even nails that. So
yeah, no, and it is a really nice ending, isn't it? It's sort of that idea of you put all the bullshit to one side when it really counts, sort of thing.
And then Wish You Were Here plays as they go out. Yeah. I was sat there as a kid like, what is this film?
What about you, Josh? I reckon you've got a few things to say.
Nothing like huge. At first, and I've already touched on this a little bit, I thought it opened a bit frantically and I was not too sure what was going on. But the more I thought about it, and I slept on it like yourself, Alice, the more I thought, that's the point. So I don't know about that. Perhaps would have liked a little bit more exposition, because I'm not sure if you didn't know anything about skateboarding, whether you would be able to get everything you wanted out of this film. But having said that, that might be the point. It might be the point that it's made for people who like skateboard in the way that certain biopics are made of certain people who are musicians or whatever. So maybe a little bit more around, for example, when they're doing the skateboard and the competitions, more around what makes them actually good at skateboarding. Because if you didn't know, you might not know. It's a bit like, actually, it's quite funny. Was it when we were talking about The Replacements, Alice? I said the same thing about American football. I was like, if you don't know about American football, you might not know if this is good or bad. Having said that, it does do a good job of not spoon feeding you. So I wouldn't say there is anything in particular, just maybe a little bit more exposition.
There is a little scene you've reminded me that I really like, because I sort of had the same thought process when I was a kid. I was sort of asking Natty, my sister, I was like, is that good? You know, like when they bounce off big things and do a big spin, a little manual. And obviously she thought it was cool as fuck anyway, so she was like, yeah, go learn it, go on quick. But they have a scene where Stacey's out in his driveway because Tony like got a better score than him or something in the competition, and he's trying to get those like 720 spins, and he starts with like a 360 and falls off and then spins a bit more and a bit more, and it gives you like a slight little teaser of, you know, what goes into it. But yeah, I agree with you there, man. It could be cool to see like a little bit of the training and maybe like them all trying to one up each other in the street, you know, who can jump the biggest stair, so who can do, you know, whatnot.
Okay, well, we'll move on to talking about the critical reception then. You've alluded a little bit, Drew, as to how you think it did. Alice, how do you think it roughly did? With the critics, how do you think it did?
I mean, going off what Drew said at the beginning, probably not very well. To be fair, the critics have surprised me a little bit recently. But I don't know if they'd like it. I feel like they'd see it kind of as just maybe trash, and, you know, they'd be like, oh, who even cares about skateboarding anyway, sort of thing. So I reckon it didn't do very well, and you're probably looking like around the 6 mark, like kind of probably not even 60% from the critics, maybe like a 58 or something.
So you already know, don't you, Drew?
I literally, just because I did a little Google before, but I think on Rotten Tomatoes it was like 55. Maybe on IMDb it was like a 6.5.
Yeah, so you're both either right or in the ballpark. So basically, at the time of recording on IMDb, it gets 7.1 out of 10.
Oh, that's not bad.
That's not bad. On Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 81%.
Yeah.
But the critics give it 55%. So I do think that probably it tells the same old story we've talked about before, Alice, which is the audience seemed to like it and the critics didn't. So what do we think, Alice? Is that fair? Is it harsh?
The critics rating for me, that is definitely underrated.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. What about yourself, Drew?
I agree. I mean, every single person that's watched the film has said to me it's fantastic, and they're not all people that are into Jimi Hendrix and Zeppelin and skateboarding and things like that. It's just a well-made film, and you got to look at it for what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not looking for some deeper rooted meaning and some absolutely heart-wrenching story. I mean, in areas it can be, you know, with like Sid's death at the end and all that.
It is a bit, yeah. You just reminded me before of like the moment when they are skating with him in a wheelchair. Like, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, man.
That absolutely broke my heart.
So I would agree with both of you. I think it's critically underrated. The IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes score between those two, probably about how I would consider it, sort of 75, 7.5, whatever you want to call it. What is interesting is I had a little look at what the critics had to say about it. So sometimes if it's not clear, we have a little look. And
here we go.
Yeah.
It's not Schindler's List.
But it's actually worse than that. So usually one of the things we talk about, Drew, is that they'll just compare it to another film that's like it. So they'll say like it's not Citizen Kane, or it's not The Godfather, something like that. What it says in this sense is, now we touched on this at the beginning, which is that there is a documentary about the Z-Boys called Dogtown and the Z-Boys, which was really, really well received. And then they made this. And I got here 4 separate bad reviews that all say it's not the documentary.
No,
but it's not, is it?
No
You're right.
shit,
It's not. No,
Yeah, well,
it's a dramatization.
So for me, that's not to just say. So basically, it's stuff like that. So Stacey Peralta has told this tale once before and done a better job as the director of the documentary in 2001. There's no need for this movie. The weaknesses underline the strength of the documentary. It's just, I just don't see that as you've got to take it as its own entity, right? Like how many James Bond films are the same plot?
Exactly.
Like all the Marvel and comic book films are the same plot.
They sound like a bunch of squares to me.
Yeah, so for me, I'm gonna nail my colours to the mast and say that's underrated. Would you both agree?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
big time, man.
So there we go, another one sliding into the underrated vault, Alice. It's getting bigger and bigger. I think we're gonna have to extend it eventually. So Drew, tell us a little bit about Rosellas. Tell us where we can look out for you. What's going on in the world of Rosellas?
Absolutely, loads, mate. Loads of stuff. We've been in the studio profusely. We're writing and creating loads. By the time the podcast comes out, we just would have had a single out called "Before the Storm," which is an absolutely belting track written by our rhythm guitarist Ewan. We've got another EP on the way later on in the year. And in between those, we've got a plethora of gigs. So we've got the big one in Liverpool, Jimmy's, which is August 13th. We've got a sold out one in Manchester in our hometown at Gulliver's, which we're all looking forward to. And we've been asked to support Black Grape down in London at the O2 Islington. But yeah, that was a bit of a mad one because my mum used to play Black Grape songs in the car as a kid. I recognised Sean Ryder's voice and stuff like that, so I always thought it was the Mondays. But, you know, as I grew up, learned to distinguish him and that. So, yeah, we got asked to do that. So we're going to have to hire a splitter van or something. All those broke students just put in 50 quid each, get down there, kip in the van and come back up. But, yeah, we're looking forward to that. And then there's all sorts of gigs elsewhere, Leeds, Sheffield, Northwich. You can see them all on our website, which is rosellasband.com, all one word, lowercase. Well, doesn't matter, capitals, does it, in a web address? But anyway.
and your music, can we get that usual places, Apple, Spotify?
Yeah, man, we're everywhere. You'll find us in your mum's car tomorrow on CD. Yeah, it's on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, if you want to be a diamond and support your boys by buying some music, because, you know, Spotify pays a penny to the pound. But yeah, we also give on our website, we've got t-shirts and merch like that. Pretty cool designs. We all designed them ourselves. I designed them, like one of them to look a little bit like skater wear. You know, we want people to wear them because it looks cool, not just because it's got our name on it. And if you order one of them, you get a free demos album with it that I mixed like a good few months ago. So, you know, we're just trying to get our music everywhere possible, man. We're not trying to ram it down your throat, like, but, you know, if you want to get involved, there's plenty of stuff to buy or listen to.
And social medias, where can we check you out there?
So Facebook, we're on there, just / Rosellas Band. Twitter, I think it's at Rosellas Band. Instagram is rosellas.band, because I think someone stole our name a few years ago. I know, bastards. And then
is it a bird watching group?
Yeah. What else we got? I think we've got like YouTube as well and stuff like that. It's all the standard garden, man. You'll be able to find us on there.
Okay, well, there we go. So do be sure to check out the guys' music. We'll make sure we put plenty of links out. Check out their gigs. Sure, they'll be playing near you. So go and see them. Go support them. I've given it a listen, and although I've said my music taste is terrible, I quite enjoyed it. So there we go. Thanks very much for joining us, man. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a blast.
Thank you so much, Drew. Thank you so much for making me watch this.
Yes.
Very happy about that.
So there we go. Thank you very much for Drew for joining us. I think you were made up with that film, weren't you?
I was. You know, I just went in wanting to love it, and I loved it.
You love a skater boy.
I do. And I will say, see you later, boy, because this is the end of the episode.
it is the end of the episode. So join us next week where we will have another episode for you. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's just Films and That Pod. Wherever you get your social medias, do be sure to check out Rosellas because they're a lovely bunch of lads, and we're hoping to see them blast off and become as big as some of the bands that he was talking about then.
All thanks to us.
All thanks to the fact he came on this podcast and talked about a film.
Exactly.
So yeah, get in touch with us. Give us a rating or review on iTunes if you've got the time. That would mean the world to us. Otherwise, we'll see you next week for another film. Alice Oliver, thanks for joining me as ever.
Thank you, Josh. Pleasure as always.
And it's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.